Okay, so you've fairly recently marked a major milestone with the topping out of your IC3 Super West data center. From your perspective on the ground, what does the milestone represent for both Macquarie data centers and for Sydney's AI ecosystem?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. The topping out was a key milestone ahead of Super West opening in September later this year. It reflects our continued investment in the latest generation of data centers, aiming to house hyperscale and enterprise customers and provide secure, reliable support for the acceleration of AI, cloud, and colocation data center requirements here in Australia.
Okay, and I think you've invested about 350 million Australian dollars, and there's about 2,500 jobs being created. So, any thoughts as to what that scale of activity says about the pace and confidence of AI and cloud market in Australia at the current time?
Yeah, I think the pace at the moment in Sydney and across Australia is quite extraordinary. I think the global demand for both AI and cloud capacity is driving increased customer demand, and that's playing out in the update, upgrade, and construction of new data center services and capacity. And that's primarily due to the megatrend of building into the cloud, combined with this more recent demand for AI infrastructure, which is obviously a lot more power intensive, and it's also driving a need for data centers that are designed differently from those of the past. Now, Macquarie Data Centers have been building and operating data center infrastructure in Australia for the last 25 years, and we're continuing to build and fit out our data centers to be able to not only power AI, but harness the efficiency benefits that AI can bring over time. And we see this investment as enabling that digital uptake, that digital infrastructure that's so crucial not only to Australia's economy, but also to many other economies around the globe. We've got a very high level of confidence in the market, and we're also actively pursuing new data center sites to expand our campus, expand our investments, and give our customers room to scale. And we're seeing that demand is really reflected in the conversations we're having with our customers. I mean, in support of that, we recently announced the successful completion of a 50 million incremental debt facility, which brings our debt capacity up to $500 million. And that just enables us to continue to expedite capacity delivery beyond our phase one and invest in the long lead time equipment necessary to build out the infrastructure. And we're seeing our customers want capacity much faster and at much greater or increased amounts in comparison with cloud uptake historically and also enterprise uptake.
Okay, and if I've understood,
We've also,
sorry,
sorry, no,
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 carry
please
on.
go ahead.
No, you carry on, please.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think we've also seen that the government has also recently the National Reconstruction Fund has made a significant investment in Macquarie Technologies Group, and that really reinforces our position as a sovereign provider. And it's very rare that government invests in business, and we think that's a really special opportunity for us to continue our growth and make sure that we're part of that digital economy of the future, and are able to effectively provide the sovereign infrastructure that underpins and supports Australia's most critical industries.
Yeah, and to that point, I think that it was the New South Wales Treasurer emphasised the facility's impact when it comes to future business productivity, research capability, and global competitiveness. How do you see IC3 Super West contributing to those outcomes once it goes live?
Well, I mean, I think you'd agree that data centers are the foundation of these types of investment, and certainly Australia's AI investment, and they have to be purpose built for that investment. And that's the core value of Super West. It's not yesterday's data center. It's purpose designed for today and tomorrow's technology needs. And the importance there is tomorrow's technology needs as well. We see the technology of the future is evolving very rapidly, and building that type of scalability and optionality into our data centers is a key tenet of our design process. Australia is a geopolitically very stable and sovereign nation, and with the right laws and jurisdiction. And we see that data centers will be a key part of that. Organizations wishing to expand not only into Australia but also into the APAC region will see this as a strong location to invest in a politically stable environment. The other thing that we think is quite interesting is that there's been a lot of data center investment across the region over recent years, but the cost of construction across the region in what we would typically see as lower cost environments has really increased over recent years, and it's actually quite comparative with Australia now, and we think that's driving more investments and more interest in Australia itself as a location of choice. So I think, up to your question, I think Super West will help to support Australia's AI ambitions and will add to Australia's prominence as a strategic hub for the massive and growing APAC region.
Okay, and I'm also wondering if what the plan is in terms of how the facility will support hyperscalers, enterprises, and neoclouds. Do you have any sort of thoughts as to the profile of the customer base that you're looking to serve?
I think one commonality across them is there is really a need for much higher amounts of capacity, shorter timeframes, and very dense infrastructure. But one thing that's become quite clear to us is that these infrastructures are yet to norm. You could put all of those kind of factors into a melting pot and say, oh, well, we can build for the future in a particular way. But in reality, these infrastructures and chip architectures especially are driving this approach, which means, different supply temperatures, different cooling methodologies, whether they be liquid or air, or a combination thereof. And so I think that, we're still going to see not only the infrastructure evolve, but certainly the AI infrastructure, the compute, the GPUs that are put into these facilities drive some of these changes in infrastructure and design in the future.
Yeah, and to that point, I think you're using a hybrid cooling design, and clearly, as I think you've outlined already, a high density AI focus. Anything in terms of the engineering decisions you made that sort of set this project apart from what we might call more traditional data center builds?
Yeah, I think compared with more traditional, this facility is engineered for the AI era density and the level of uncertainty from day one. And what I mean by that is we think that chip designs, chip architectures, and designs and needs of facility will change in the future. And then rather than being adapted from traditional enterprise data center models, we've designed with that in mind from the ground up. So that means, a hybrid cooling design that will support air or liquid assisted or future liquid cooling without changing the fundamentals of the facility itself. So, what we've really factored into our consideration is optionality. Now, that means ensuring it's relevant for AI infrastructures we understand today, but expecting that they will change in the future. And regardless of whether that be the electrical lineup or the cooling methodologies that are applied, this is obviously it's a long-term investment. Data centers are designed to operate for the next 20 or 30 years with the level of investment required. But we certainly see that there will be a number of evolutions in technology. Making sure that the facility is able to adapt to those effectively is a key tenet of that process.
And in terms of the sort of AI landscape, there's clearly a lot of new players entering the market, and it seems as if a lot of them are perhaps underestimating the infrastructure demands, cooling, power, density, etc. Are there any particular misconceptions you think that stand out when it comes to building AI ready? Is it that future proofing you think, or just anything you can share as to where people might be going wrong?
Mm, mm. I don't think it's so much a case of going wrong, but it can't simply be treated as an upgrade to traditional infrastructure. It's really about driving a new design from the ground up, that allows for extreme power densities, sustained heat loads that require liquid cooling, and enterprise-grade resilience. And that applies across the board, regardless of whether you consider it from a power or cooling perspective or from a security standpoint. And that drives a level of engineering complexity from the ground up. It also means there's that I think organizations can underestimate the engineering complexity and the long-term planning required to secure power and get a truly scalable facility constructed. Yeah, I think it's not something that can be rushed. And whilst there's good examples of large facilities being built for AI in other regions across the world, there are some unique aspects to constructing within Australia that not only include some of the permitting processes, but making sure that it's truly AR ready needs to be considered from the ground up, and that includes everything from engineering to the skill sets required to be able to effectively manage these large scale facilities.
Okay, and as you
I
referenced
think.
earlier, Australia is becoming, I won't say unexpected, but it's emerging as certainly a gateway for AI in the Asia Pacific region. You mentioned the sort of construction costs becoming sort of
Mm.
aligned, should we say? But are there anything else? Is there anything else you think that's driving the trend and the demand accelerating so fast? What other factors are at play?
Mm, mm. Look, I think one of the major factors here is some recent economic analysis that we had a very close look at, which was led by the Australian Computer Society, and it was really focused on the contribution that AI could bring to Australia's economy, which suggested that could be up to $142 billion each year by 2030, which is a significant contribution to the economy. And that could be through accelerated AI adoption across industry, development of a domestic AI sector, and establishing Australia as a regional exporter of AI-enabled products and services. And I think each one of those presents different opportunities to business here in Australia, but it certainly is a startling indication of the type of benefits that could be delivered to the economy here in Australia. Australia's got a reputation of being an early adopter, but I'd have to say it's taken a while for AI adoption, particularly in business, to really get off the ground here. And I think it's very early days. But I think what is interesting is that once we get going, we go all in. We ramp up fast and very successfully here in Australia. And despite being in the early part of that AI adoption curve, we're seeing the investment in translating those outcomes in Australia sort of starting to bear fruit. And I think it'll be a fundamental tenet to business in the future that those organizations that are successful will have incorporated and embedded AI capabilities into their business. So I think, along with that, Australia's increasingly being used as a strategic testing ground, if you could call it that, for emerging AI technologies with, global players like like Google, for example, incorporating some of their um, new capabilities into their browsers, reviewing opportunities like drone deliveries, and appealing to Australia's tech-savvy population. And I think that's going to certainly drive that level of investment. And along with it comes the associated infrastructure that is an essential part of that investment that goes along with it.
Okay, and I guess at the moment there's a big focus on the AI training, the large language models, and then at the other end of the scale, if you like, the really local edge environments, but perhaps less talk about the middle layer, which we might call inference at scale. Just your thoughts as
Mm.
to why that layer is so important, or maybe will become so important, and how it might shape future data center design. Because I guess you're combining a bit of the large language models with a bit of the edge, but just your thoughts, I guess, as to inference at scale.
Mm. Well, I think we haven't really seen that take off here, but I think the more inference is baked into standard business applications, it's going to become more important that infrastructure is located close to the edge, and for the processing of workloads really needs to be where those users are. There's no doubt that if certain applications can exist at the edge with slower response times, they don't need a real-time answer. But I think inference um, will require infrastructure that's closer to the end user, and particularly as it becomes embedded in business operation. If you take, for example, say ag processing or or the types of applications that might drive day-to-day business, um, latency is a very key issue, and I think will be something that defines the success of those applications in the future. So I think there's going to be a real need for that layer to exist at scale in the cities where the uptake is, and certainly around the country where we are going to see a lot more applications now being delivered at the edge.
Okay, and I guess we are now entering the phase of agentic AI or AI agents, and as they are
Mm.
taking on more functional roles across business, government, etc., are there any particular new risks or responsibilities you think that data center operators face that maybe you just didn't even think about a few years ago because of the new world we are in now?
Yeah, I think they're part of the trust chain, that, and they support security, they support resilience, they support the intellectual property of the business. So I think there are now responsibilities, particularly in data center infrastructure, that now go well beyond uptime. They really need to consider the resilience and the security, and that's not just accounting for misuse and containment. It becomes a strategic obligation for data centers to ensure that resilience is there. Um, but it's also a key part of making sure that the services we provide are relevant to the customers that utilize them. I think designing or building something today, when the customer will demand something different tomorrow, is a very real risk. The stakes are high there. I think, particularly given the huge investments required for modern AI-capable data centers, it becomes something that's absolutely paramount to how we expand our campus and how we invest in our facilities in the future.
I've heard more than one person describe what's going on globally as a bit like the Wild West. So there are clearly a lot of new and sort of untested players flooding into the data center market. Just your thoughts, I guess, as to what operational maturity looks like and why experience maybe matters more than ever at this current time. I mean, I'm sure some of the new folks, will, get a foothold, but clearly it's an uncertain landscape, shall we say. So why is it important that the experienced folks are sort of listened to perhaps more than others?
Mm. Yeah, there's no doubt that opportunity creates opportunities for new entrants, but it's not really an industry where people without a very specific set of technology, engineering, and design expertise can build success rapidly. I think, I think this is where a safe pair of hands really comes into to play. We've been a trusted technology company for more than 25 years. And one of the factors that sets us apart is that we're a long-standing tech company and that's trusted over time with data center expertise. This means we speak the language of IT and understand the environment we host. And I think that is particularly important for our customers. And that puts us in a strong position to guide and support customers in a way that stands out in the market that I think is not always possible with new entrants coming into the market without that level of expertise. Um,
And in terms
but
of, sorry, yeah.
yeah, no. I was just going to add to that that rapid capacity expansion that's sort of underway at the moment. That's going to create some extraordinary pressures on power grids and particularly the assets, making sure that assets are utilized correctly. And I think it will take a lot of skill to negotiate and to navigate how that plays out in the future and how that's balanced.
Yeah, and to that future, is there anything particular that you can see as a bump in the road when it comes to providing these AI data centers, or is it once you've understood much of what we've discussed, it's all relatively easy, or can you see, say, any sort of potential disruptions on the horizon over the next couple of years, say?
Yeah, look, there's no doubt there's an extraordinary demand for resources that go along with any data center construction process, regardless of whether that's, during that construction or ongoing utilization of power and other resources. But data center leaders must earn their credibility through experience. And I think under pressure, theory can falter sometimes. And judgment, clarity, and agility come from a wide range of experiences. I think having seen failure, being able to recover from it or recover from it and building better as a result of it is particularly important. I think firsthand experience, there's no doubt that, that can really make a big difference in terms of recognizing early failure signs, being able to act swiftly under pressure and lead teams confidently through different scenarios. I think as we go through this period of change, and particularly the integration and adoption of new technology standards, I think being able to leverage a combination of skills and resources, and as well as the right leadership, will be particularly important for successful outcomes in the future. I think it really boils down to two core areas, which is people and design. We've invested a lot in our people through technical training and graduate programs, certifying people. But with design, it comes down to a need for speed, managing that demand with higher capacities at higher density. And I think, these two things can be at odds with each other when, we're adapting to changing market dynamics and changing demand at pace. But there's no doubt there's some huge opportunities, and even the opportunity for data centers to use AI to improve the planning process, certainly the design process, and improve the operation of our own facilities.
And maybe just in finishing, I think you mentioned earlier that the IC3 Super West is part of an overall strategy, and I think you've got a 200
Yeah.
megawatt pipeline. So anything
Yeah.
you can share as to the roadmap in terms of I guess how IC3 Super West fits into the long-term AI and cloud expansion strategy, and where we might see you in the future. Just I'm sure there's some things you want to keep under wraps, but anything you can share would be interesting to know for sure.
Yeah, I think, I mean, this demand for AI infrastructure is not going to change in the immediate future. IC3 Super West is our um, flagship product coming onto the market very soon. Comes online later this year in September, and then we continue to build out capacity to meet demand. But obviously, that requirement for additional capacity is increasing so fast at the moment that we're continuing to invest in our data centers and in our future plans. Um, I think yeah, Sydney as a hub for growth, it's the largest city in Australia, and has experienced some phenomenal growth in data center capacity over the last few years, and we don't see that changing in the near future. It is the landing place of a lot of subsea cables, and we're going to continue to see that fiber density being part of that growth plan and growth strategy as data needs continue to grow with that infrastructure. So it's an area that we're going to continue to invest in and build out our infrastructure um, over time.
And is it fair to imagine that, but what we talked about, particularly about the AI inferencing side of things, that you might be looking at building out data center capacity in some of the other Australian cities over time? Is that something that you'd be considering at some stage?
It's certainly a focus of many of our competitors. We see a lot of people looking outside the CBD to start to commence that growth plan, and that is due to some of the constraints or challenges associated with deploying infrastructure in very populated regions. But we believe there's strong demand in the city for ongoing capacity, and certainly from a latency and fiber density perspective, we think that's going to continue to drive the uptake that we see in our facilities, certainly over the next little while.
Okay. It's been fantastic to chat, and thank you so much for sharing so many great insights into what's going on at Macquarie, and your thoughts on the data center industry and AI more generally. So, Paul, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Phil. I appreciate your time.